Hello and welcome to this episode of Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're doing a recap and review of The Mandalorian Season 2 with myself, Matthew Fox, Ashley Coffin, and Paul Hoppy. All that and more after a commercial break that we have no control over. Welcome back. This is Matthew. I'm super excited to be diving into pretty much the entirety of Season 2 of The Mandalorian. There's so much to talk about. And joining me, as they have for a number of the discussions about Mandalorian, are Ashley Coffin and Paul Hoppy. Ashley, starting with you. How are we doing tonight?
Really good. How are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. 2020 is just about over. That's not a terrible thing.
It's New Year's Eve.
And I'm excited to get to talk about one of the good things of 2020, because there weren't that many. So
it's so true.
Paul, what about yourself?
Yeah, there aren't a lot of years where, one of the highlights of the year for me was, watching a piece of media, I guess. But this year might be true. That might be a thing.
I feel like all I did was watch media this year. I got to the end of Netflix and found my way back.
Well, it's like you can either watch a show you enjoy or you can watch the news. And
yeah,
the news hasn't been good. I mean, no matter who you are, right? I mean, not that there hasn't been any good news, but just overall, regardless of what your takes are on the world, you can't be that thrilled with, what happened this year.
Mm-mm.
And what I find hilarious about all of this is The Mandalorian is probably the most dystopian, depressing of any Star Wars media that I've seen. In terms of just the overall feeling of it. It's not the hope in the midst of absolute darkness that so much of the Jedi movies are. It's not, it's all set in this world where, good has sort of won, but nothing good has come of it. And the Empire's coming back, and everyone's going to betray you. And it still feels like such a happier, more hopeful world than anything we're living in at the moment.
It does. People are getting shot left and right, but it's it's okay.
It's just stormtroopers. Who cares?
It's just stormtroopers.
I would deal with some dangerous, unsafe doors in order to go back to an office or restaurant.
I know. I really miss restaurants.
Yeah.
Seriously. The unsafe doors are a metaphor for the danger when we walk through. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, no, we're not going
there.
Right.
Okay, let's do it.
I want to say one quick note just to our listeners, and then we'll dive right into this. Folks, if you follow my podcast, you know that I do Star Wars Universe podcast. I also do Superhero Ethics. I also appear on PandaVision quite often, including recently with Ashley Coffin. We're talking about The Stand. And starting in 2021, I'm combining all of those different social media presences into one, The Ethical Panda. All of them will still be their own individual podcast, but we now have a website where you can go and find all those different things, as well as instead of having to check social media like Twitter and Facebook for all these different things, I'll be posting everything about all my different podcasts on The Ethical Panda, on Twitter, on Facebook. We may also be creating one podcast feed if you want to listen to all of it and just, get it all in one go. I'm still working out if that's going to make sense. But certainly, if you're just interested in Star Wars, if you're not as interested in some of the others, anything like that, nothing will change for you. We're just saying that this is a chance to, if you want to have access to all of them at the same time in terms of the social media and stuff, go to The Ethical Panda on Facebook or Twitter or theethicalpanda.com. So with that, let's dive into Season 2. What are some of your overall thoughts on this season?
I'm so happy we finally got to see lightsabers.
Yeah.
I just felt like the show, I loved it all so much, but I was missing that little bit of lightsaber.
For me, the season started off a little shaky. All of my least favorite moments are basically in the first 3 episodes. Mm-hmm. And then all of my favorite moments are in the last, I'd say the last 5, but especially the last 4, Mm-hmm. I mean, Ahsoka showing up, and it's refreshing to have a Star Wars show that doesn't focus on lightsabers all the time, right? Even if the Darksaber is going to become the biggest plot point in season 3, perhaps. But it's what I love about Star Wars the most, probably. how do you come up with this idea of like making these laser swords? It's like, it's so weird. Like, really, it's so weird. Like, why doesn't it just keep going? Like, it comes back around, or like, it doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, I know like in the books there's like some explanation and stuff, but like, you know, they're just cool looking.
Yeah.
So true.
And they looked as cool in this series in episodes like 5 and 8 as they've ever looked, right? And it's not the only reason I watch Star Wars stuff, but like it's a big reason.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to see them again.
I concur. You said that a lot better than me.
I think that's such a great way of putting it to both of you, because I feel like this show was always about trying to strike a balance of, on the one hand, trying to give us something fundamentally different than Star Wars had always given us. You know, that it wasn't going to be a Skywalker saga story. It wasn't going to be about the epic space battle that decides all of galactic history. And I think in the first season especially, they really did a great job of setting this up, that this is a story told in that world, but that's pretty separate from this. You know, it's the stories going on under the radar screen.
Right.
But I feel like they also knew that it still had to feel like it was part of that larger world. And that just using Star Wars names or maybe Stormtrooper outfits wasn't going to quite be enough. And I feel like this season they gave us just a couple of those things. You know, we got to see X-Wings blowing things up a couple of times. We got to see the lightsabers. We got to have little bits thrown in to the larger Star Wars canon that a lot of us love. And I think that to me is one of the things that makes me just so happy about it, is that it found that balance, especially because, and I think we talked about this a lot as we were going through the season, one of the fears was always that, like, could you have just a few minutes of Ahsoka? Could you have a few minutes of Luke? And then really go back to the show about the Mandalorian and Grogu without it just becoming now this is just going to be the Luke and Ahsoka and Grogu story, and we're going to lose all that stuff that we loved about it not being that. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to me, I know many people love that show. I feel like it's kind of an example where it started really small, but then it just kept getting bigger and bigger and sucked into the larger things. And I feel like the way that it did this, of like, here's Ahsoka, she's relevant to the story in this moment, but now she's going to go away and have her own show.
Yeah.
And here's Luke coming in a way that makes total sense. I think we talked about how if it wasn't Luke, it would kind of be like, well, why isn't Luke here?
Right.
And he did it in a way that kind of puts a period on Grogu's story, but it doesn't feel like that's now going to take over the show. And I just thought that was so brilliantly done.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, you know, people say like, oh, this is like Legends Luke, like from the books that are now like Legends canon or whatever, right? But like, like in the end, like he comes in like a legend and then goes out like a legend, and now you can have the story go on in, you know, I mean, we discussed like whether or not you could continue the Mandalorian without Grogu, and like, you know, I think in the intro to, you know, the season 1 wrap or the like sort of pregame for season 2, I was like, I don't think so. Like, why would I watch that show? But now I'm like, yeah, I'll watch season 3, even if there's no Grogu. You know, I don't expect to see Luke in any significant role in season 3. I don't expect to see Ahsoka in any significant role in season 3. I imagine she'll be doing her Ahsoka stuff, right? And I'm really happy that a lot of these characters are going to kind of get their own spin-offs, and if that's the character you want to follow, then you can just follow that character, or you can watch everything. But here it feels like, they were able to work those characters through the plot and not in ways that leave the plot changed, right? But not like I didn't feel Ahsoka's absence in episode 6 or 7, and I don't feel like in, you know, chapter 17, I guess, right? Because they're going by chapters or whatever. Season 3, episode 1. I don't feel like I'll feel Luke's absence. Like, where's Luke? Where's Luke? It's like, no, we got that. That made perfect sense for that episode, and now we're gonna go and do whatever season 3 is gonna be. You know, maybe it's trying to retake Mandalore or something.
Right.
It's just really, like, they could go so many other places. And I think because they gave us, you know, what happened to Luke Skywalker, I didn't need him to continue. Like, I don't need him to be in my next season.
Yeah. And I think that's right, because it's both like just a little bit of Luke fills in so many of those gaps. I think we all, me especially, but we were all talking about why isn't Luke paying attention to this new child showing up with Force powers, and so to see that was so needed. And I think I think I'm fine with that. I think if Mandalorian continued to be the only Star Wars property that was being released, I might be a little bummed that we're not getting more of Ahsoka, or that we're not getting, this particular thing. And I think, in some ways, especially it also is so good that they're now getting to kind of an MCU type place of there's so much content that's going to be coming out, and hopefully it's all good. Maybe it's not. We'll see. Knock on wood. Knock on plywood, whatever the hell my desk is made of. But I feel like, okay, I don't need Ahsoka in The Mandalorian because she's off doing her own thing on this other show. And, I don't need to keep getting X-Wing pilot Appa back again and again, because hopefully he's going to be in the Raiders of the
Lost Republic.
Raiders of the New Republic. The Rangers of the New Republic show. If not, we riot. But,
right. Yeah. No, we need that.
I now feel like they've managed to now have. Before it was like, okay, hey, here's Mandalorian in that universe that you know about, and now it's going to be here's Mandalorian and the rest of that universe and all these other shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I need my Defender style meetup where they're all going to get together and then do a season or whatever the plan is there, because I love that more than anything. I love team ups.
Yeah,
and crossovers. Yes. I remember Buffy Angel crossovers used to just make my year.
Yeah, I haven't followed much of the Arrowverse. I used to love it. I used to watch it all the time. It got a little too big and life got a little too busy, but I still will every year watch the Arrowverse crossover shows that they do, which I really enjoy. And there's so many ways they could go with that. It could be everyone's on one team. It could be kind of a Civil War type thing where a couple people are lining up with Mando and a couple of them are lining up with Bo-Katan, and, we have that conflict. There's just so many directions it could go.
And where will Ahsoka fall into all that? I'm excited.
Right.
Because after that episode, we kind of went into depth on the podcast. I didn't want to not see her anymore. But luckily, the next episode was so good that not that I forgot, but I was okay with it.
Yeah.
Right. It's okay, here's a little bit of Ahsoka. We're not going to give you her as a full character, but here's Boba Fett and Fennec and just some high octane action for 27 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Robert Rodriguez.
And then they announced all the shows. Right? Did they announce them between 6 and 7 or 7 and 8? Maybe
I think it was between 6 and 7. So it was after we'd had one episode without Ahsoka, and then they dropped, oh, by the way, you get a whole new Ahsoka show.
Right, exactly. So I think that was it was either very intelligent or serendipitous timing, because it made her not, I don't think she was the character who was supposed to show up in 8, right? In episode 8 of the season, but there might have been more of a feeling of why isn't she here? Even just throughout the episode, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so by announcing that they're doing all these spin-off shows, and then they deliberately didn't announce, the Book of Boba, I think because they wanted that to be a surprise at the end of episode 8.
Mm-hmm.
And but letting it was kind of this show of good faith. It's hey, look, we know you've only gotten some of these characters, but don't worry, there's more coming.
And I admit I am going to be a bit suspicious, hesitant to jump in too far about Star Wars marketing, because as we discussed in an episode a couple months ago, the last time Star Wars marketing did a brilliant campaign, it was about telling me about the Black Jedi I was going to get to see in some new movies. So, a little bit of bitterness there still.
Wow, wait, when was that?
Yeah, the post goals.
No, I know, but what was the marketing for that? That was what you thought heading into.
John Boyega has talked a lot. The actor who played Finn. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm referencing to how, if you go back and watch the trailers, and especially the one of those prominent posters that was up all over the place. Mm-hmm. Was of John Boyega holding a lightsaber.
Holding the lightsaber, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there was a couple of lines about new Force users will emerge or whatever the language they used. And so they never explicitly said it, but I think they certainly teased it in a way.
They let him hold one for 5 minutes in the first one.
I don't want to go on a long thing down that road, but I actually think the marketing with regard to the first one and having it not be spoilers, like, personally, I approve of that. And he did wield the lightsaber, and the character is definitely Force sensitive. Huge disappointment that they didn't actually get into that. And they're just sort of like, oh, I've got to tell you something, Ray. Ray, I've got to tell you something. Oh, the movie's over. Fuck. Like,
I think in terms of just the publicity for the first movie, it's fine. It's then that they drop that plot line. But anyway, that's
I agree. 100%.
I'll also say in this regard, and I think this is actually, like, there's a lot of talk about how the Star Wars fandom is one of the most toxic out there, and there's a part of me that wants to fight it, and then there's a part of me that looks at what happened to, like, the actor who played Jar Jar and the actor who played young Anakin, and it's like, yeah, no, we're pretty awful sometimes. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of fandoms are. I think some of that's and I think there's a lot of great parts of the Star Wars fandom. But I think one of the things that I think I'm so happy that Mandalorian did is to break down the wall between the movies and the animated shows, Clone Wars and Rebels specifically. Mm-hmm. I think there has a long time been, those shows were kind of the ugly redheaded stepchildren, and I say that as a redheaded stepchild, of the Star Wars universe, in terms of, you know, the hardcore fans had seen them, but a lot of fans were like, it's animated, I'm not so into it. They almost never got referenced in other stuff. And there was also a perception of, like, that diving too far into them can lead to the kind of super toxic, like, well, but you know, you don't really understand Star Wars because you didn't see this one episode or you didn't read this one book or that kind of stuff. I felt like, and Ashley, having you on the cast, I think was so good to help confirm this. Like when you talked about Ahsoka not having seen those shows, this season did such an amazing job of honoring the stories that come out of Clone Wars and Rebels without making people feel alienated if they hadn't seen them, but instead just making people more excited to see them.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I actually, and I'm not really into the cartoon stuff. When I was watching it, Ken was like, nope. I was like, but you're going to learn so much. He's like, nope, they shouldn't have made it an animated show. I was like, touche. But then I got into it, and if I didn't, I wouldn't have known. Even just a couple episodes, you get a real feel of who the character is. And with that being an animated show, I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Right.
I'm personally, like, I'm a big fan of animation in general. Like, if I could watch everything animated, I would probably prefer it. My favorite DC content is animated. Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated series, is one of my
movie.
is maybe exactly is maybe my favorite thing, like, of all time in terms of fiction. Maybe not, but it's up there. Mm-hmm. And, like, the animated series for Star Wars, I like as much as the movies. I think there's, like, a little bit of a sort of, like, anti-animation bias in, especially, like, in the United States, where I think because there's this association with, like, Saturday morning cartoons and the idea that, like, animation is supposed to be more for children and, like, you know, meat puppets, like, pretending to be other people is supposed to be, like, for adults. You know, it's like, I mean, if we look at, like, all drama, like, it's all ridiculous, right? I mean, it's like, it's all people playing pretend. But, like, in animation, there's just things you can do that you can't do as well. Like, you can just have any character show up at whatever age, whenever you want, without having to use de-aging technology or, you know, oh, this actor died. Okay, you get someone to imitate their voice. Like, but you know, at the same time, I don't say this to, like, try to shame anyone for not liking animation, right? My point is mostly just that, like, no, really,
no, keep
really.
going.
Like that. I do think that there's this sort of, like, hesitance, right, with it, and, you know, that's not to say that, like, oh, that's the true Star Wars, or whatever. It's like, yeah, I like that better than the prequels, for sure. You know, I like it better than the sequels, and kind of unequal with the, you know, the original series, and then Mandalorian I like as much as all of that. That's kind of like the Star Wars that I like, right? Yeah. And the main point I want to make is that, like, I appreciate that there are people who like different parts of the Star Wars canon or non-canon, right?
Right.
And I think one of the dangers is that there's people who are just like, oh, you know, this is the true, you know, this is the way. At some point I want to get into how toxic that statement is. Actually,
yes,
this is the way.
But
like, I don't know. What's my point? My point is basically like, I think I'm agreeing that this show, I think, does a great job of kind of, I feel like it makes people want to delve more deeply into the universe, but at the same time, you don't have to know everything that's gone on. Like, I haven't read a single Star Wars book, right? I've heard about a number of them, but you don't have to read the books to enjoy Mandalorian. You don't have to watch the animated series to enjoy Mandalorian. You don't have to even really enjoy the Star Wars movies to enjoy Mandalorian. Like, Lee is like, yeah, I don't really like Star Wars that much. Like, she just doesn't. But she enjoys Mandalorian.
That's Ken.
It's its own thing, right? It's just different. Yeah, it's like, it gives you something that none of the others give you, while also tying in with everything, kind of connecting things to one another. And it just feels like it's made with a lot of love for the world, for the universe, for the Star Wars universe, or galaxy, as I would say. But at the same time, with a lot of understanding that there are a lot of types of Star Wars fans, right? Yeah. Who get different things out of it. And I think it tries to provide a lot of different things for different people. And I think it amazingly somehow does a really good job of it.
I think that's a really good way to put it. I mean, if you had told me 5 years ago that there'd be a TV show where one of the things that people would be the most excited about was Ahsoka Tano showing up in live action, I would have laughed you out of the room. Because I feel like she was known in the Clone Wars. Most people didn't know her. But you're right, and we've talked about this. The fact that so many people who love the TV show were so thrilled to see her on live action, and that so many people who'd never seen any of that still loved this character. I thought it was so good. And I will say, I'm kind of like Ken in some ways, and Paul has helped somewhat talk me out of this. I was very hesitant to watch any of these things because I don't like animation in general. And, I've somewhat had my mind changed. That shows now like Batman the Animated Series, Avatar, She-Ra, I think are some of the most brilliant things I've seen, and they're animated. And I will say that, Paul, I think you're right that the assumption that animation means it's a kid's show is not one that people should hold on to. Certainly, Matt Carroll and I did a review of the animated, kind of anime style of Altered Carbon. That is not a kid's show by any means.
Right.
But on the flip side, like I do think it's important to acknowledge the Clone Wars was very much made to be a kid's show, and I think it's one of the problems with the show. I think it's a very good show, and I think in later seasons it stops being as much for little kids. But I'd say compared to something like Batman the Animated Series or Avatar The Last Airbender, I do think it has a little more of the, okay, well, this is content that adults might find a little bit, eye-rolly, but we're going to get to the good parts in later seasons.
Yeah. Well,
I think you're right.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, like, I think it's important that we acknowledge that Star Wars movies were basically designed to be kids' movies also.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that they don't also have something for adults, but it's like, that's maybe one of the reasons I like the original series so much more than I like the prequels, because I saw the original series as a child and had that experience, and then rewatched it and got different stuff out of it as I, grew older. But the prequel series I saw as an adult, and I was sort of like, oh, what's all this like pod racing and, some of the really kind of kiddie stuff that felt like not, I don't know, that I hadn't grown up with, so I didn't have the same kind of emotional bond. I don't know.
Well, we were just watching Rise of Skywalker with the riff tracks the other day, and every time that little guy, whatever the heck, and Ken's like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, no, they got to throw something in here for the kids, merchandising. And you can look at like Lord of the Rings. There's lots of parts in there that are made just for the kids to be like, oh, we're having a good time. All of a sudden now back to the darkness.
Right.
And then when I was trying to watch the animated shows, I remember liked Clone Wars, and then I tried to start Rebels, and I hated it. I couldn't. I just went to the Ahsoka Vader episode, and that was it. Other than that,
so
I was
good,
like, I can't watch this.
Yeah,
that's legit. And like I think overall, Rebels has more of the not quite so childish stuff. But yeah, the first half season I think is pretty rough.
Yeah, the first half season took me 3 years to get through.
It's too many
basically.
characters.
And then the third season took me last 3 days. I was going to say 3 days. I was going to say 3 hours, but I was like, that's impossible. That's not true.
Like 25 episodes.
I watched it on double speed. Exactly. Yeah, I was quoting that, but I did it in Yoda sentence structure.
There you go.
It was more of a paragraph structure, but whatever.
Did you guys used to watch the X-Men animated show?
I've watched it as an adult.
Yeah,
I've
loved
watched a
that
couple
as
of
a kid.
The one with like that theme music.
Ba, ba, ba. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mostly I just know it as the one that has the yellow spandex that they make a joke of in the first Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen movie.
Right.
Yeah, but things like Archer, like everybody loves Archer, Rick and Morty, and I'm like, I think the jokes are funny. If I watch it with my eyes closed, I laugh. But I think it was my awful childhood.
Was your point about the X-Men series that it wasn't that
I
good
actually
compared
loved
to
that one. I love
okay.
like as a kid I watched that, and I can watch that one now as an adult. I'm just very picky.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of this is, and this is going to allow me to make a bit of a rough transition, but a transition to something I wanted to talk about. I think that there is a real skill in being able to tell a story that both really resonates for kids, but also has enough meaning for adults.
Absolutely.
I think Batman the Animated Series is a fantastic example of being able to do that. So is Avatar: The Last Airbender. I do think the original movies do it better than the prequels, for example. And I know a lot of people who are involved in the production have said that Lucas really wanted to kind of skew younger even than he had for the original movies.
Right.
But Paul, you're right. My sense of nostalgia about it probably has a lot to do with that as well. But all this is to say that I think one of the people who, to me, when I think of like the pinnacle of doing that, honestly, it's the Muppet Show. And I promise I'm going somewhere legitimate with this. But just because
I see it.
I love the Muppets as a kid. And then later I would watch it as an adult and be like, oh, I never got that. Wow, that's really pointed critique. That's kind of brilliant. The point of all that being that I have been thinking about the Muppets and Jim Henson quite a lot in terms of this show. And that's something I wanted to at least touch on for a few minutes because, and forgive me for going on a tangent, but I promise this is relevant. Jim Henson is kind of one of my heroes. I mean, like I said, I love the Muppet Show. I love what they've done with things. I think their version of Christmas Carol is probably my favorite.
The Jim
Christmas
Henson
movie.
Hour was my favorite.
Right?
With Shelley Duvall and that white lion. Oh, I loved it.
And he really believed that puppets could be kind of on the same level, like what you're talking about, Paul, with animation. He had a similar thought with puppets, that you could have puppets that would be just as emotive and evocative for audiences as meat puppets, as we call it. Felt puppets versus meat puppets. And he made a couple of movies that he really attempted to do that. Labyrinth, which is a kind of a cult classic, absolutely beloved by the people who love it, of which I'm very much one.
Dark Crystal.
Dark Crystal. Dark Crystal even more so. That was really supposed to be his puppet magnum opus. And again, it's a cult classic to those who love it. It fell flat for a lot of people. The new TV show I've heard is very good. But I know that he always really wanted to see puppets that could get to that kind of place.
Right.
And he obviously has passed away, but both Jim Henson and his partner Frank Oz have always been deeply connected to Star Wars. Frank Oz was the voice and the puppeteer of Yoda in the original movies, and like Jim Henson Studios has always been a partner with Lucas. And I remember so clearly, Ashley, you made a comment about how the puppeteers of Grogu should get like an Emmy nomination for Best Actor. Because they just made this puppet be so emotive, so like the puppet made me tear up.
Yeah.
I just, I know Jim Henson's no longer with us, but I just feel like this was, and I think some other things have done it as well, but this was the kind of thing he was talking about. If he could have seen what Grogu was able to do, like, I just kept thinking about all the stuff he would say that I've read about how puppets could one day be actors like anyone else. And I think what this show did with Mandalorian is really kind of groundbreaking in that regard.
Yeah.
With Grogu, I mean.
Yeah, it's total vindication of that view, right? I mean, Grogu's amazing. Grogu's one of my favorite characters of all time. So is Yoda,
Yeah.
And they're played by puppets, but they're no less real a character than, a character portrayed by a meat puppet, if you will.
Yeah. there was some Twitter thing that I saw that basically said who would have thought that the most tear-jerking moment, the most powerful moment of this entire TV series would be between a puppet and a metal box on wheels.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, that scene with R2 was so good.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say I figured at some point you get into like what our favorite moments were from the season, but
Yeah, definitely.
Two of them were, one, the whole Grogu like reaching out to Din, like basically asking him to like take off the helmet, and then like clinging to his leg, at the end.
Yeah.
But just there's this sadness that, I'm trying to remember the last time I've seen an actor really convey that sort of deep, lasting sadness that I feel like Grogu carries through both seasons, really. But I feel especially in this season, especially at the end. And, I guess I've seen actors do it as well, but like not better. I mean, it feels like how could you do it better than that? It's just so evocative, and so like bittersweet. It's just amazing.
They had brought up in the gallery, they were talking about the episode where Ahsoka's there and Grogu's sitting between them at the fire, and the Mandalorian says something like, well, you can take him, right? And she just keeps talking, and so subtly you just see little Grogu like turn his head and just look at him like, really? And then he just puts it back and puts it down. And that wasn't like a whip around or anything. And if you weren't looking for it, you didn't even see it. But stuff like that is what makes him real.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so subtle.
And it's funny, I was thinking of a moment from that same episode, but a different one. When Ahsoka is able to kind of like, mind meld with him and connect with him, however you want to put it, and then talks to Din about like, here's what he's been feeling. Like he has all this fear. He has all this sadness. On the one hand, I was glad that we could sort of get that because it's all been kind of just guessing from his, because he's nonverbal. But also none of it surprised me. Because I felt like, we've seen that. We've seen that sadness. We've seen that fear. We've seen that sort of playing with his own powers, but in a very nervous kind of a way. And just so powerful for that. What were some of people's other favorite moments?
I really enjoyed the Mandalorian girl gang. I loved it. I liked Bo-Katan a lot. She might not be the best leader for the Mandalore, as I'm starting to see, but I really enjoy Katie Sackhoff, and I really enjoy the character.
Yeah. She's another one who, as just a fan of Rebels and Clone Wars, I'm so thrilled to see her come to life on screen. I thought having the person who's also the voice actor be the live-action actor is such a great choice. And just that moment, especially when it was a number of women, without it feeling like a setup, without it feeling like a pander, it was just, oh, hey, most of the people in this crew who can really kick ass are women, and here they're going to kick ass in fantastic ways that each utilize the specific things they can do, including jetpack parkour.
Yes.
That whole scene was just so good.
Every time they were like working together in those, I guess they were in 2 episodes?
Yeah, episode 3 also.
Okay. Yeah, it was.
That's where they introduced them, and there's like a dude there too. But then they're like, we don't need him for this.
We don't need him.
I have a list of things, which that's on it. The first one was just every minute of the last episode. Basically, it just felt perfect to me. I don't know. I think I've watched it like 5 times already. Nice. It's one of the nice things about the episodes being so short, which is a whole another thing I want to get to at some point. But like the episodes are short enough that you can watch them more if you want. If you like really love an episode. But yeah, I mean, just like Luke's arrival, like the return of the Jedi, basically in the last episode. The badass fire team led by Bo-Katan, who I think I saw I think she actually pronounces it Bo-Katan, so I'm going to go with Moff. Okay. Yeah, I thought I've said Bo-Katan all the time, which I thought was like what everybody said in the TV series in like Clone Wars and Rebels, but I'm not sure. But I listened to them mostly in Spanish anyway, so what do I know in terms of how anyone pronounces anything?
Is it Katan or I don't know. It all sounds right to me.
Right, yeah. I mean, I'm sure this fictional character won't get upset if we...
it's good to respect the names.
Right. And at least she doesn't have the Darksaber to like cut our heads off or something with it. Although I'm sure she
could
fine.
probably beat my ass still.
Yeah. It's kind of a super badass warrior. And again, like to reiterate from the last episode, like her leading the strike, it just made so much sense. And to be able to set that up, to have that, fire team led by her, and to have it all be women, and to have it feel earned, right? Like you said last time, Matthew, like that they did the work to have a scene like that work on a level without feeling at all like it's pandering. And like, I'm fine with a little pandering, right? But if you can achieve the same thing without it feeling like pandering, all the better.
Exactly. Like, I think that scene in Endgame was a needed thing in some ways, in part because of just how MCU has not done more to with women representation and things like that. But you're right. This is just Ashley. Your sound comment is, I think, a perfect statement.
Yeah, like that's how Lee feels too. She's just like, I don't need that. But it's like, I get it, and like I enjoyed it in the movie. I agree that in Endgame, in Infinity War, the sort of smaller scale version of that feels more natural. But in this, it's just like this is. There should be a lot of scenes like this because there just are a bunch of good female characters, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, because that should be like about half your characters in everything. So
it also highlighted something that I think is one of the most interesting parts of Din's character, even though we haven't talked about it much, which is that he is someone who is obviously incredibly competent, incredibly skilled in a number of things, but is also very good at recognizing where he's in the presence of someone who has better skills and happily just letting them do it.
Exactly.
I remember he did that with Cara Dune in season 1. There's a scene where he just like recognizes like she's the better shot for this long range thing, so he gives it to her. And here, like, he's like, I'm not going to try. I'm a one-person bounty hunter. I'm not going to try and plan like a squad assault. Bo-Katan should do that. Cara Dune should do this. Grief should, like all these other people who are around him. He's very good at deferring to them when they should be the leader.
And that, I love if you watch like how they shoot the scenes when they're all like, when the 3 Mandalorian ladies are heading forward, they look like a well-oiled machine, where he's just kind of like bumbling a little bit behind them because he doesn't look like he's part of that gang. He's just with them, where they're working like a machine.
Yeah. In episode 3, right? You're talking about, or
Is that that's the one where they're on the ship.
Yeah.
Related to that also, and this kind of goes to Paul, the thing you wanted to talk about, This Is the Way, and I'll sort of talk about this, one of my favorite moments, then let's have that longer conversation. In season 1, we get introduced to the Mandalorian, and we're basically taught like he has this like super badass Mando warrior culture. His weapons are his religion, and he never takes off his helmet, and all these other people like in the dark tunnels saying this is the way, and we'll show up to support you, and like all these cool things. And it's the kind of thing that is very, like, in the moment, like, yeah, this is the way. That's a great line. And you think about it, and you're like, well, people calling guns part of their religion, this is not, no, all these problems with it.
This should not be the way.
Yeah, like,
everyone's entitled to their tagline.
This is the way, as like, but I mean, I think Paul, tell me if I'm wrong, I think the point you're making, though, is that, like, having a life philosophy of this is the way, we don't question it, we just do it, is horrible.
Yeah. It's like, yay, dogma! It's like, wait.
Yeah. But what I love is that this season, like, I've talked often, especially on superhero ethics, about how my biggest problem is when a character does something dumb and the writer doesn't seem to know it.
Right.
And I felt like this season it was very clear that the writers knew all along. They wanted to show you how badass it is because he wanted to understand why Din bought into it so heavily. Mm-hmm. But you also understand that there's problems with it as well, and that this season is all about exploring that. It's about exploring the idea of there's actually many different approaches to being a Mandalorian, and some of them are good, and none of them are like good or bad. All of them are just different and have problems and have ideas, and maybe there are some times where you take off your helmet even though you're told not to, or you do these different things. And I just thought the whole season did such a good job of complicating the idea of Mandalorians and making it this much richer world with all sorts of different perspectives on different creeds and ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It gets a little muddy for me with the whole Darksaber thing with Bo-Katan when she's, you're going to throw away all these other rules, but you're not going to just take it. Just take the damn saber.
Right.
See, I feel like though that there's actually a great thing I saw on TikTok about that. I would link if I can find it again. But it made this brilliant point that's actually sort of the point, is to show, like, here, these two people, both of whom think the other one is, like, not really following the way.
Right.
But they each have a dogma that they hold on to very tightly, even though they don't care about the other part, you know? Mm-hmm. Bo thinks he's ridiculous to keep the mask on at all times, but also thinks that, you know, you have to win the saber in battle. And there's a whole backstory there that the first time she got it, she didn't win it, and maybe that's why she doesn't.
Right.
But I just love the idea that both of them, kind of what they share is that they're both deeply connected to these creeds, that they have to do this thing always, even though the audience is able to look at both of them and go, dude, take off your damn helmet. Keep the saber. Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nobody else is going to know.
Right. Well, so, I mean, so here's the thing. So first of all, I think that the first season introduces, like, this is what Mandalorians are, right? This because that's all Din knows, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And he's been given this dogma, this way to hang on to. And it's something that he maybe needed at the time, right? As a child who'd lost, it seems like his world got, like, genocided or something, right? And so he gets rescued by some Mandalorians. So they're like, this is the way. He's like, okay, this is the way. And so he has this to hang on to. And if, you know, for those of us who've seen the animated series, we're like, wait, but that's not how all the Mandalorians are there. And so it's a little confusing. But then in this season, it all makes sense, right? That in season 1, we had this very kind of narrow worldview, and this narrow view of what Mandalorians were, because that was his narrow view. Mm-hmm. And now his view's expanding, so we have a more expanded view. In terms of the toxicity of the phrase, like, literally, this is the way, regardless of what it refers to, it's very powerful. It's like, this is how we do things. But, I mean, personally, I'm in favor of questioning everything. And, coming up with our own the way. Like, yeah, I know. This will surprise everybody who's ever met me or listened to
I more meant I was
podcast.
questioning the idea of questioning everything. But yes, also go on.
Okay, sure. But, like, we can make ways for ourselves and whatever, but also, like, when that way is, like, this warrior culture, like, I don't know, maybe that's just not the best, it's like, in terms of, like, Bo-Katan, I really enjoy her as a character, right? I think she's very true. I love that they have the voice actor playing the character in live action, and it looks like, I mean, if you go back and you look at the series, like, oh, I guess they modeled, the character after the actress. Like, were they thinking, like, okay, in 10 years, 15 years, maybe we'll do a live action? Maybe they were. I mean, I don't know.
Filoni said it to Katie Sackhoff, like, when they started. He's like, one day, if everything goes well, this could possibly be live action. And she was like, yeah, right, And then the first day she was on set in her outfit, she just started to cry. Because she's like, look at me.
Oh my god!
This is an
I
actual
thought was
story.
Joking. I didn't realize that was actually a thing that happened.
It's in the gallery.
Awesome.
The gallery. They just did an hour and 10 about this whole season instead of episodes like they did for season 1. But I love it.
Oh, okay.
I eat that stuff up.
I definitely.
I watched the first episode of the gallery from season 1, and it's great. And I'm looking forward to watching the rest. That's a great recommendation that you gave us, Ashley.
Yeah.
And I should have watched all of them as like a responsible podcaster, but but that's awesome. That, like, they made there was already that kind of, like, that there's that much forethought, right? And I mean, that's why I think Filoni is kind of like the perfect person to be involved in creating something like this.
Yep.
His stories of, like, how he got involved in the Clone Wars in the first place is hilarious.
Yeah.
And, the director, the episode with the directors where they're talking about, they really assembled a diverse group of directors, and it seems like they really worked together, right? And, I mean, film is such a collaborative medium, or it should be, where you can have someone who has a vision, but you really need to be able to have input from other people and kind of be able to pivot, and because just one person is often going to miss things.
Right.
But
good.
No, go ahead.
It's dangerous to do that too, though, to get so many different people in there trying to tell one story. And I feel like they really did it very well in this one, and that's not the norm.
And
I think it's difficult.
Yeah. And
sure.
it's funny too because when the Force Awakens movie came out, there was all this talk about how it had to be the palate cleanser. It had to be the thing that reestablished people's trust in Star Wars after so many people thought the prequels weren't the best. And there's all stuff we can get into that. And I certainly felt like, okay, now I trust Star Wars again. That trust was then all sorts of stories there, but I feel like, but I remember like Paul, you and I went to see that together, and I felt like, okay, it reminded me of the good things of Star Wars, but it did that by just showing me them all again in almost the exact same like ways, and maybe I didn't quite need that much spoon feeding of like, hey, do you remember why you liked New Hope? Do you remember this scene? Do you remember that scene? And I feel like it's not talked about as much, but that I think if we look back at the history of Star Wars in 30 years, people are going to remember The Mandalorian as another one of those major turning points of this is what not only got the fans back after the postquels, but also found a way to tie everything together and to bring all new fans in. I don't think there's any way I'm as excited about all that new content that's coming out if I hadn't seen The Mandalorian and now felt like I trusted them again. And so much of that is Filoni. It is Favreau. It is just this amazing team they have that makes it feel like they're talking to each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Those two giggle on set exactly how you would imagine. They're sitting there like, we can't do that. Yeah, we can. No, we cannot do that. And they're just laughing in the corner. And they're like, what are they talking about? It's just the dream job.
I'm just quoting all the memes and TikToks and tweets today, but like there was a great picture that went around, and it's of two 8-year-old boys playing with like Star Wars toys.
Yes.
And it's Filoni and Favreau plotting out Mandalorian season 3.
Right.
It feels so accurate. What are the things we wanted to talk about in terms of what made the scene so good, or it wasn't perfect. What things that we maybe were not the happiest about? Either way. Or just interesting questions to go into?
I have a list that could go into like a 5-minute diatribe.
It's never stopped you before.
And 5 minutes is pretty short for you on diatribes. So,
all right. Well,
why don't you go 3 at a time and then we'll discuss them?
Yeah.
Okay. So the last episode, I was only halfway through because like the badass fire team led by Bo-Katan is like that could be a whole episode.
Yeah.
Honestly, just talking about that. Grogu and the helmet removal, like, oh my gosh. The cinematography, the editing, it was so perfectly paced. And the music, like, the music in that episode, I mean, the whole series, the music's great, but I feel like everybody just, like, upped their game in the last episode. Episode 6, the action, the variety.
I want to actually stop there and say one thing just about that scene with him removing his helmet.
Yeah.
I thought we talked about it during the season, and that this was. I remember, like after he meets the Mandalorians, I was at first frustrated that we're not seeing more of him wrestling with.
Right.
What does all this mean? And I realized it's because he's not someone. We never hear his internal dialogue. We see him do these things through actions, not through like talking to people about it. And I thought the two scenes where he removed his helmet, both for like the reasons related to Grogu, but one was to like make sure he could save his own life and save Grogu, and then be able to save Grogu's. The other is just to connect with Grogu and help Grogu. It was so perfect, and what it reminded me of, and this connects a lot to the conversation we just had about like creeds, and the problem with them is, this is going to sound like a stretch, but I promise this makes total sense, at least in my weird head. I am a Christian. I come out of a Christian theological background, and one of the things I'm always fascinated by is the same idea of what we're talking about, of you have a creed, you have a belief, and it's fairly ironclad. What do you then do when a piece of evidence appears or a situation occurs that challenges the creed that you think is unquestionable? And one of the ways I judge people is, are you willing to adjust your creed and adjust your worldview because of the new evidence and situation, or do you just reject it? And I think that's so much what we see the problem with fundamentalism or conservatism or any of those things is like, well, this new evidence, it doesn't fit. I'm just going to throw it out. One of my favorite professors in seminary was someone who was now very much on the progressive end of things. He had started out very conservative, and he said that, like, for him, one of the real changing moments was when his daughter came out to him as being a lesbian. Because it was this moment of, you know, and he's a huge theological nerd, but he used these kind of terms, but he said, like, look, in my head, my daughter is an example to me of the beauty of the divinity of God and the wonder of the universe. And so if my daughter is gay can't be wrong. And he then talked a lot about how, like, broken it was that he couldn't see that in other people and all these kind of things, but it was just this wonderful moment for him of his creed did not fit the situation that he was now presented in, so he had to adjust his creed.
Right.
And to me, that's exactly what the Mandalorian is doing with his helmet. You know, is he was ready to die to not break this in season 1. But then now, when it's about either saving Grogu or even just helping Grogu, he's willing to change that. To me, that was just such a beautiful moment of growth, but also just of, like, showing where he is, that maybe this creed doesn't have to be so ironclad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he does that, I mean, first to save Grogu, but, like, no one's really looking at him then. But, like, at the end, you know, like, Luke's right in front of him, and there's a bunch of people in the room, some of whom are Mandalorians, and I think he does that, not just because, like, Grogu wants him to, but then he's like, don't be afraid, you know, and Ahsoka told him that his fear of losing those he's attached to will be, you know, could be bad for him, basically, right?
Darth Grogu. I can't wait.
Exactly. And he's like, don't be afraid, I'll see you again, I promise. You know, and he takes his helmet off to make that further connection, you know, that Grogu wants to make. And so he is able to say, you know what, my creed, like, first of all, I've probably already been questioning it since the minute Bo-Katan was like, oh, yeah, that's just, like, a few Mandalorians who do that. That's not, like, the way of all Mandalorians. Yeah. But, like, now it was like, okay, so he questioned it, but, like, he didn't have any reason he really needed to take his helmet off. So it's like, even if he's questioning it, he's like, I don't need to change the way I'm doing it. Like, there's nothing wrong with keeping your helmet on all the time, unless you've got that ancient Imperial technology where you have to take your helmet off in order to get the coordinates to where you can go get your kid back, and then you want to take your helmet off so they're not going to be afraid and turn to the dark side and become Darth Grogu.
Yeah. I kind of want Darth Grogu.
No.
He's already got the Force choked down.
I think we need, like, a what if series or something.
Yes.
Grogu grows up to be Snoke. He just has the ears adjusted at some point.
Oh,
right, exactly. Yeah.
One other little moment I wanted to throw out also, and then let's go back to the list. In terms of the whole thing with the Darksaber, one direction that I've been thinking about that I hope it could go, and it kind of goes to what we were just talking about with their different roles, is what does it mean to defeat someone or to win? And we joked about, like, could, like, Bo-Katan and Din just have a foot race or something?
Yeah.
But I think especially since it's meant to convey leadership, I've always thought it, and this is kind of a critique of Black Panther and other thing, but also, like, 8 million stories do it. But this idea that in order to be a leader of lots and lots of warriors, you have to win a single individual combat has always struck me as kind of nuts. And I think one way they could look at it, I kind of hope that maybe this is what Bo-Katan kind of adapts, is she needed to win the Darksaber in battle in order to be able to claim the throne. She won it because an army that she led, made up of people following a plan that she influenced, won, and that part of that winning was one of the people she was commanding was put in a situation where he could fight and defeat the person holding the Darksaber. This may be one of those, like, from a certain point of view moments, so it's... But, like, I feel like, you know, if you're the general and, like, your soldiers conquer the building, you didn't physically do it, did you still win it? Like...
Yeah.
I think it could be an interesting moment there of shifting away from, like, the individual warrior to the leader.
Yeah, she just needs to suck it up and do that. Because I don't want to see them have to, like, oh, now they're going to fight to the death. Like, episode 1, I don't want that. Because it's not going to happen. But
no, they're not going to fight. People think they're going to fight. I don't think they're going to fight. I mean, maybe they'll fight. Who knows?
She looks like she could fight it. Like, that would be her second choice.
Right.
My guess is, because as I said, I went back and read and rewatched some of those episodes. It is pretty clear that it is given to her in Rebels. And so what I wonder is, we still don't know. We keep talking about the planet of Mandalore being turned into glass and this terrible thing. We've never seen how that happened. Right. I wonder if in one of the new shows we're going to get some of that backstory. And that one of the things that we'll see is that maybe people didn't fully trust Bo-Katan as their leader because she hadn't won it in the way that... And so now this is going to be about her getting another chance to explain, to convince people why she should be their leader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like, I enjoy her as a character. I don't think she's necessarily, like, the right person to rule Mandalore. I kind of don't think anyone is. Like, it's awful that the Empire destroyed their planet, but they sound kind of like a terrible culture, to be honest. Like, honestly, they're just always, like, civil warring each other and killing each other, and it's like, maybe it's just not the best. Maybe just, like, go do you. I don't know. I mean, I'm not at the risk of offending everyone in the entire world, I'm not a big fan of cultures in general, which certainly includes the ones in which I've existed. Could maybe be highly critical of them, but, like, you know, and some of that does have to do with, like, dogma and creed and whatever. But, like, it also feels to me like, I mean, you know what? We don't even know really what the situation is with Mandalore now, right? Like, so they obviously, you know, they glassed the planet. I'm not sure exactly what that means, if it has anything to do with Operation Cinder.
I mean, like, there's apparently, like, if you apply enough heat and pressure to sand, it becomes glass. I really hope that doesn't mean we're getting into a whole bunch of things about sand-covered planets.
We already have one of those.
Well, no. Now they're glass-covered planets.
Exactly. I am definitely very excited to explore what happened on Mandalore and to see more of that. Especially because... And we're going to do a whole episode before that comes out on a sort of primer on Mandalore. We may actually do a couple of these because Mandalore is one of the most discussed planets and cultures in the Star Wars universe, especially in terms of one that is almost never touched on until this show in the real canon. Not the real... But in the movies and the like. In the Legends canon, there's tons about it. It's been referenced a good deal in some of the newer books and video games. And I think what's interesting is there's a lot of stuff about it being this, like, you know, badass warrior culture that 14-year-old boys and 25-year-old boys who think they're 14-year-old boys are still going to love. But there's also been a lot that's very critical of it. When Mandalore is a major part of the Clone Wars, it's all about this Duchess who Obi-Wan has strong feelings for, who is really trying to get Mandalore away from its warrior culture. And the fights that leads to. So, yeah, I think there's so much to explore there. And it'll be interesting because I think we always think of Mandalore as just this badass warrior culture. Obviously, there's a lot more to it there, and I'm hoping we'll get to see more of that.
Is that Bo-Katan's sister?
I don't think so.
Yes, I believe. Oh, yes, Bo-Katan.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were talking about Casca Reeves for some reason.
Oh, yeah, Bo-Katan.
Yeah,
Bo-Katan's sister was Duchess. I always get Sabine and Satine mixed up.
It's Satine, because like the Moulin Rouge movie, they definitely did that on purpose, I think.
Yeah, no, we had Ewan McGregor's character twice fall in tragic love with a character named Satine. It's kind of wonderful, even though it's not Ewan McGregor voicing it, but still. But yeah, so Bo-Katan is, and in the show, there's these great moments of conflict where Bo-Katan thinks we've got to fight, and the Duchess Satine doesn't want to. Yeah, those are some of my favorite episodes.
Right, she's a pacifist.
So,
right? I mean,
to follow up, is that why Boba Fett keeps calling her princess? I think I'm having a breakthrough.
Yeah.
I get it. Okay.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Because I thought he was just being a jerk.
Kind of condescending in general, especially to people who are being rude to him. But yeah, I think that is... she is connected to what was a royal family of Mandalore at one point in time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he knows who she is.
Interesting.
Yeah. And just on Boba Fett, that's another part. I did not think you could introduce Boba Fett to me in a way that would make me happy. Yeah. I always thought the obsession with him was kind of dumb. I thought he got eaten by the Sarlacc. Let's let it be. He's a bad guy in those first movies. And the fact that here we are cheering on the guy who caused Han Solo to be trapped in carbonite, you know, like, it was like, Okay. I buy into this. I didn't think I would, but here I am buying into it, and that's fine.
He's so cool. He's just too cool.
I feel like he's more morally neutral in the original trilogy.
He's just.
I mean, he's like Mando. You know, he's like Din.
Yeah.
He's just like, I have a job. I'm doing my job.
The government of the day
you're
says
doing
that
it for
Han
some
Solo is a
bad
criminal,
people.
and so he should be arrested. And so he's just doing his thing.
I just love
although
that...
it wasn't because he was a criminal. He wanted to capture him for Jabba.
Oh, right. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
more,
that's right.
Even more so.
I just love that we've had that back and forth since season 1 about what happened to Fennec, and who knew that we were already shown Bubba in season 1, and none of us could have guessed that that's who it was going to be. I mean, maybe somebody did, but I didn't.
Didn't we?
I think the minute they started talking about Boba Fett coming back, some people were like, "Oh no, I've always known this." And maybe some people predicted. Who knows?
Yeah, because we all talked about the feet walking up, and we're like, "She's definitely not dead." But I wasn't thinking that was Boba's feet.
I will say one thing I want to put a veto on right now. I have seen some folks suggesting that a great part of the Book of Boba Fett would be some kind of like, not rematch necessarily, but like a confrontation between Han and Boba Fett. And no, please no, please no, please.
I don't think they would even fight. He's
I
a
just
different
don't-
person. He's a different Boba Fett now.
Yeah, I just no.
Well, and he doesn't have a bounty.
Yeah,
Like, he's not going to just fight Han because, like, he's mad at him.
Oh, I think the idea is
right?
that Han might be kind of pissed and might come after Boba. But
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
Could hold a grudge.
no,
I mean, he
please
did
no.
get eaten by
That's
the
possible.
Sarlacc.
Seems likely.
Is that what
wait,
it's
would
called?
they use the same person who was in Solo? Probably, right?
That's my
Yeah,
thought.
Sarlacc.
Which again, I just no, please no.
Let's stop talking about it so it doesn't, happen.
Right, don't will it into existence.
Exactly.
It seems very likely to me now. I feel like that's definitely what's going to happen. Also, I think Obi-Wan and Vader are definitely going to meet, and I'm not sure it breaks canon. I have to rewatch A New Hope. Because he cuts himself off mid-sentence. A presence I have not felt since...
I think it
And
strongly
then,
breaks the implications of the canon. Like I feel like kind of similar to Ezra Bridger and things like this, and all the other stuff we've talked about. There's a lot of ways in which you can technically read those lines and it fits. It just feels like it breaks the spirit of it.
Yeah, I feel you.
And that could be my own.
But they're
headcanon.
gonna do it. Just prepare yourself. That's all I'm saying.
I will also say, just backing up one thing, I was talking about how we're going to do so much on the Mandalorians. We've had people on the podcast before who are super deep Mandalorian fans, who know all about it from Legends or things like that. So we're going to have a couple of episodes probably about Mandalorians and all the different ways they've been talked about and all the different theories. There's a person whose content I've been following and commenting with a little bit back and forth, who, as far as I can tell, is a linguist who's done an exhaustive study of the language of Mandoa, which is the language of the Mandalorians. And he runs this great series of TikToks about it. I've been showing them to Paul, and Paul is now fighting the urge to learn Mandoa.
I will not learn Mandoa. I will not learn Mandoa.
Well, but you may come on a podcast to discuss the linguistics and grammatical nature of the Mandalorian language and what it says about their culture. So,
and how much it may or may not relate to Mandarin.
yes, we are diving deep in 2021
Right.
because we have so much Star Wars to be excited about, and we can't talk about it yet because it's not here. So, all right. Anyway, enough of my rantings there. What are
Back
kind
to
of
the
well
list?
into? We're well past.
Yeah,
an
I was
hour,
still
so
on
let's
bullet
start
point
wrapping up.
1, by the way. So,
Oh boy.
Yeah. Go ahead. Give us a speed round.
all right. So everything in the last episode,
Hold on,
episode
we're
6
gonna do it this way.
action.
Paul, you're gonna start giving us the list. Ashley, you and I at any point can say ding, which means we stop and discuss the thing he just said.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, I like it.
Ready?
I like it. Yes.
Yeah.
Go.
Okay. Every minute of the last episode already pretty much covered that. Episode 6 action, the variety of choreography there I thought was amazing. Episode 5, just Ahsoka showing up, how awesome her lightsabers looked, how well they nailed the look of, just everything about Ahsoka, and pretty much all the last 5 episodes. But Paul Sun-Hyung Lee showing up.
Ding. Just to the Ahsoka
yes.
thing. In
Okay.
terms of when I think about moments of how you do an Easter egg in a way that is so good for the fans who love it, but it doesn't in any way hurt the fans who don't. Her just saying the words, "Where's Grand Admiral Thrawn?" I think may be my favorite Easter egg that I've ever seen on screen. Like, it was just such a good way of making those of us who are so excited about him just go through the moon without anyone being like, wait, who is that? Because it's done in such a throwaway line. You're just like, okay, there's the name.
Yeah, it's just one sentence. This is what I'm looking for. Everybody who doesn't know is like, who? I guess that we'll find out later. And everybody who knows was like, what? Oh, they're going to bring in Thrawn. Oh, are we undinging?
Yes, now back to the list.
Okay. Paul Sun-Hyung Lee showing up, though I hope he gets more action in one of the new shows. Raiders of the Lost Republic. Yeah. Grogu and just his sadness and like expressiveness and Grogu. Huh?
Yeah, ding. Stealing cookies.
Oh, stealing cookies.
Being a little jerk. I love that stuff too.
The poor kid who wants the
Right, I know, the poor kid with the macarons,
like,
the $50 macarons.
Grogu.
And then the music, like not just the last episode, but just throughout.
Yeah,
it's just amazing. That's it. That's my whole list. I mean, I kind of sped through.
There you go.
I mean,
it's not
Bill
everything
Burr.
I love.
I really enjoyed Bill Burr's character. I hope that they bring him back again.
Yeah.
This time,
I really enjoyed him shooting that guy.
Me too.
And then blowing up the whole place.
It's like, sorry.
Bill Burr was a part of this, but I also thought this show did such a good job of... The word humanizing often is meant to mean like making you feel more sympathy for or justifying. And I don't think it has to mean that. Because I do feel like this show did a great job of humanizing the Empire. In terms of... Right. In those first couple movies, like, not only is Vader and the Emperor just complete mustache twirlers, but we figure out Vader's motivations by the end. But all these stormtroopers are literally just like nameless, faceless people who can just be shot at will because they're just Nazi stormtroopers, and so they're terrible and bad and should be killed, which agreed. Mm-hmm. But empires don't actually work that way. Like, people make decisions. People believe in these things, and it's horrible and scary, but it's important to know why. I loved getting to see that. Everything from both the people who are like the guy who Bill Barr shoots, they passionately believe that the Empire is doing good no matter what the costs. And then just the guys who are, probably drafted soldiers. They don't love what they're fighting for. They don't care about the big picture stuff. But when some of their buddies who are driving a truck make it back to the base, they're going to cheer.
Yeah.
Right.
I just loved those scenes because it made the Empire... It's easy to think that evil is just awful and bad, and I could never be like those people. But to realize like those people care about the same things I care about on some level, it to me, that's a much more important and interesting point to make.
I listen to Bill Burr's podcast every week, and he said after that episode, he had tons of vets and not pet doctors, veterans and people who are in the Army and people with PTSD, write to him to tell them how much that character and that scene resonated with them and the things that they felt. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
How much they wanted to shoot their former commanding officers.
Yeah, or Vietnam and people there.
Yeah.
You didn't want to be there and you were forced to go, or drafts or things like that. And yeah, just that, I know what we did was not right. And someone's like, but it was. And you just want to shoot them in the face.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of officers did get shot by their own troops in Vietnam. Right.
Yeah.
Some sense,
that was super powerful, and I love the points that you're both making. I will say that the term humanizing,
yes,
is a little speciesist, which is funny because it's a way in which the Empire is speciesist, although Thrawn is an exception to that. So just a little sidebar there. Well, but also I think you said Bill Barr, which
it just made me just let him go.
Never mind.
You heard it, Lauren.
I will say about Thrawn,
I
don't think the TV show Thrawn has discussed this, but in the books, one of the big issues and one of the reasons why Thrawn's not involved in the war is the Emperor's wrestling with both, this is the best military commander I've ever seen, but he's not a human, so I don't trust him, and I don't like him.
Right.
And that's part
of...
He's a
blue person, right?
Yeah, he's a Chiss,
is
the name of the race.
Chiss?
And
okay.
So in the books, they actually really use the character of Thrawn to explore this thing that we've seen on screen, but has never been talked about, that the Empire is pretty much humans only. So I would love it if, in his character and some of the new stuff, that we do explore that a little bit. Because you're right, peopleizing, sentientizing. I don't know what the word is.
No, yeah, I mean, it's hard to. I don't have a better word right off the top of my head. It's like it's the word people use because people are speciesist. Yeah. But like that becomes more apparent in a world with other biped species that seem to have similar cognitive faculties to humans, but it exists in our world too.
Right. Anthropomorphized.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, but yeah. I mean, the point being that it deepens, character and adds perspective. Yeah. Right. Like,
Ashley, what about you? What's on your list? Any other last things to touch on?
I really liked the storytelling with this. I really liked a lot of the characters. I'm a moments kind of person, so that scene when they had the TIE fighters looking awesome, was that the last one? Like, I love stuff like that. They really put so much energy and effort into making everything look gorgeous and seamless, all the way down to Gina Carano's space Gatling gun. I love that thing too. The little details.
The one where they were launching the TIE fighters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the last episode, right?
The last episode, yeah.
So good.
In the Bill Barr... in the Bill Burr episode, they have that's where the TIE fighters come in to like save the day, kind of.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and we get to see them shoot
has a
something
sort of
for
different
once.
kind of like cool. You see it from the other side, kind of.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I remember being very excited about that in the cast because you actually get to see them do damage on something.
Yeah,
right.
They never
exactly.
Shoot.
They hit something.
I've never seen a TIE fighter hit pretty much anything.
Yeah, they hit some X-Wings in like Return of the Jedi. That's about it.
One X-Wing for every 500 TIE fighters,
exactly.
right? Okay.
Exactly.
I think in A New Hope, there's like 2 or 3 Y-Wings that are blown up like by non-Vader piloted TIE fighters, but not very many.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
Vader blows up. I mean, more than a few. A number of them are. But yes, the general point of...
Although some of them are like surface-to-air guns, right? Yeah. Like the Death Star's guns.
I think the general rule is just that if you are a named character, you get plus 20 to dodge. Like, that's just the...
Yeah. You cannot be killed by TIE Fighter if you're a named character.
Yeah, or Stormtrooper, or...
Right, exactly.
I think for me, the only last thing I wanted to comment on, and I talked about it before, but I think it's just worth mentioning again in a little more detail... There is such a trope of let's throw a romance into the story because it's what stories need. And I'm a hopeless romantic. I love a rom-com, and there are many movies that are not rom-coms that are action, adventure, whatever they are, and the romance is an important part of it, and I love those. I think I'm not a huge fan of Captain America, Captain America, the First Avenger, the first Captain America movie, but I think the romance between him and Peggy is so well done.
Yeah.
I love it when it fits the narrative. But there's a lot of stories we've seen where it feels like they just jam it into a narrative because they feel it needs a romance of some kind.
Winter Soldier or Civil War when he has her make out with his like maybe granddaughter. I don't know. I didn't.
Yeah,
like
the niece, the grand niece of his childhood crush. Like, okay, not childhood, but young adult. But
yeah, childhood. It's like only a few weeks later for him,
And I feel like for this though,
years.
There's no romance. Not because I feel like Dean has taken a vow of celibacy or anything like that. Although if your helmet always stays on, probably that's a thing.
Listen,
you can try and figure out the logistics of that one.
That's a thing too. Like the Mormons do their thing with the sheets, and maybe
as long as one head stays covered, we're fine.
A way to do it. Oh boy. This is not Thirstcast, Ashley. You get a chance to do that on After Dark.
It's just stating a fact.
But I love that in this, they're both not opposed to having that happen. And when in season 1, there's a scene where he is, like the farm woman is flirting with him, and he clearly seems a little interested. And Cara Dune's like teasing him about that. They're fine with showing that. Mm-hmm. But it didn't take over the show, and it didn't happen after that because it just didn't happen. And I feel like the way they've set it up, if he does meet someone and becomes flirtatious with them in season 3, if they make it feel like an organic part of the show, great. I'd be fine with that. but I don't need it. And the fact that they've had him meet Cara Dune and Bo-Katan and a number of, I'm assuming he's straight here, which I really shouldn't be doing. There's no canonical reason for that either. Could be someone of any gender. But whoever it is, like, we've had him meet and get close to people without it becoming a flirtation. Like, when I first saw Cara Dune and him, I was like, okay, they're going to fight, and then they're going to flirt, and then they're going to fuck, and that's the story we get.
Whoa.
The fact that we didn't get that made me so happy, and I just love the way the show is approaching this whole concept.
It made me think that they kind of wanted to only have, like, not the romance, but the love between Grogu and Din be front and center, because that is almost a relationship that grows and grows to full on, I love you, you're like my little son.
I mean, he walks away from the farm woman he walks away from that farm woman and that whole comfortable planet in season 1 because he needs to keep Grogu safe. Like, it's very much choosing that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, he also, by walking away from it, he keeps them safer as well.
Yeah,
because
true. Very true.
You know, you don't want people hunting Grogu on this planet or whatever. I really love that point that you're making, because personally, I dislike 90 some really high other number % of like film and TV romances. I find they're just so often shoehorned into a plot that just has no need, no space, and they're not given care to like feel like real relationships between people. A show like Chuck might be an exception where it's like spy-fi, right? But it's really, the show is a romance.
100%. Yeah.
You know, and like The Princess Bride is like, the romance is like central to the story and is really important, and I feel works, even if it's just this like, they just love each other, you know, we're not going to really get too much deeper into that. Like, so there's these small number of instances where a romance can feel genuine and organic and like it really belongs in the story, but the number of Hollywood productions that have some sort of romance just crammed into them because like somebody read somewhere that it's what you're supposed to do in a story or like it's how you're supposed to get a particular type of interest, the fact that they're just like, no, that's just not part of this story right now.
Right.
And if in season 3 there's a reason for it to be a part of a story and it's organic and it makes sense, that's fine. You know, I'm happy with that.
Maybe him and Bo-Katan can get married and then they can rule together, and then she doesn't have to fight him for the Darksaber.
Sure. It's really more of a marriage of convenience.
Yeah.
I mean, I could very well see I'm joking in my head of it being like, you know, Din is the empty nester. But it's his entire focus has been this child or his Mandalorian community and being very much this is the way I'm a loner. Now he both has recognized within him this capacity for and perhaps desire for deeper connections and is no longer feeling like his religion, his creed has to keep him away from them. So I could see season 3, I think it would make logical sense for him to kind of be wanting to put down some roots in a community somewhere and maybe build some more connections. And maybe that's romantic. But you're right. I at this point now trust the show. If they do it, it will be for a reason that makes sense, not just because Pedro Pascal is hot as the sun and we want to watch him make out with people. Which, granted, he's hot as the sun and I want to watch him make out with people. But I feel like the show, if they do it, won't do it for that reason. It'll do it because it fits, and maybe it won't, and that'll be okay too.
Yeah.
Right. It's not going to be arbitrary and contrived.
For sure. Okay, I think that gets us to kind of a good ending point. Unless either of you have any last things we didn't get to touch on?
No, I'm just excited. I can't wait to see what they're going to do.
Yeah, me too. We've got go ahead, Paul.
Oh, no, go ahead. You go.
We've got a long year ahead of us, and it's going to be... On the one hand, I feel like it's the worst tease in the world to like know that all the Star Wars content is coming in 12 months. It's like I just watched the 10 best trailers in the world before a movie.
And it's like Boba is going to be at the same time as Mando?
I think it's that Boba comes first and then Mando is going to come. Like, it's basically going to be like, we'll have 8 weeks of Boba or whatever, 4 weeks, whatever it is. And then just the next, we'll have like 12 weeks in a row or 16 16 weeks in a
Right.
row of Star Wars content, probably
my
like every
God, I
Friday or
can't
every
wait.
Tuesday or whatever. Boba.
I imagine they're aiming to have something like a regular TV schedule of like episodes coming out like every week of some show,
Yeah.
so that people do. I saw some meme that was like, I watched the last episode of Mandalorian, or no, it's like, why did you cancel Disney Plus? And it's like this, that, da da da. Finished Mandalorian season 2. This is the way.
Yeah.
Like. So I think if they roll things out kind of staggered with the different series being made, at different points in time, I imagine they'll kind of avoid people being like, they don't have the show that I'm mostly watching. I'll renew, 10 months from now, basically, when it comes back.
Yeah, and then sprinkle in all the Marvel stuff, and Disney Plus is finally starting to make a name for itself.
Yeah.
I do have two kind of questions about one thing that I was going to make. I have like 4 bullet lists, and I'm fine with only dealing with 1 or 2 of them. But
We'll post them online. We'll post them in the Facebook group so we can keep discussing them.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But one, I'm going to make a statement, and then I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
And then I'm good.
I'm ready.
I think the episode length is an underappreciated factor in this show that I've seen people complain about, but here's my bullet list. Shorter episodes allow for better episodic storytelling without adding a bunch of nonsense filler. Mm-hmm. It takes full advantage of a streaming platform where there's no reason to have any particular length, like as opposed to any other in terms of like time slots or commercials or whatever. Mm-hmm. If you love an episode, a short length leaves you wanting more, and if you don't love an episode, like at least it's over more quickly. But I do kind of want to ask. Not so much as podcasters, because weekly releases are obviously better for podcasting because it's like a bunch of events, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. But in terms of like personal preference, do you like the episode length? And like in terms of weekly releases versus all at once, do you like the weekly releases, or would you rather just be like, I'm just going to watch all 8 episodes straight through?
I like the weekly releases. Yeah, I feel like after doing that Umbrella Academy thing for like all those days, I wouldn't be able to stop.
Yeah,
I don't have any self-control. I would watch,
right.
And this
you would
just watch it all the way through, and then I'm not watching this again. I'm like, well, I have to do the podcast, but so this kind of helps me separate it out, and it gets me excited and looking forward to something, which in 2020 it's not happening a lot. So having something fun to look forward to every week is very nostalgic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I'm on the other side of the fence, and I know a number of people kind of teased me and said that like once I did the podcast version, I would see that it's better to watch it week to week. I don't think it is. I think, at least for me, it's not. I liked it as podcasters because it gave us this additional time to sort of bounce around ideas and talk about what could be and what isn't. But I felt like part of that meant that I went into each episode having built up expectations and hopes for that particular episode. And that had kind of taken me away from it. And often I would, starting on episode 5, I started rewatching some of the episodes beforehand, just kind of put myself back in the mindset of it. I think this was an incredibly good 4-hour story. And I watched all of Mandalorian season 1 as a 4-hour story. And I watched, most of Daredevil and Jessica Jones and all those things as most of the time I tried to do over 2 or 3 days. There was some time when I was in depression and not working, and I watched an entire season in a day.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the healthiest in some ways, but I think I enjoyed it a lot more. And I do think that my enjoyment of it suffered a lot because it was week to week. And I think if I just had this one amazing day of 4 hours to see the whole story straight through, and this is just me, I think a lot of people's brains don't work that way, and that's totally legitimate. I think I would have liked it more if it was just all released at once.
I have it would have nothing to do with like a personal preference, but the spoilers would be ridiculous because not everybody could watch it all at once. Like say that came out on what is it, Friday night at midnight? or whenever, or Thursday night at midnight, I have work all day. So I would have to go home and make sure I watched all 4 hours or completely avoid the internet and friends. There were so many things that got spoiled immediately after each episode. Imagine if people watched it all right away and was like, oh my God, Luke Skywalker came back. And it wasn't even 12 hours into the next day. That would be infuriating for me.
And it's funny because I don't remember that happening much with things like Daredevil and Jessica Jones, especially those first seasons. But
there's not a big reveal in that, though. Like,
well, but the internet's changed also quite a lot in the last couple of years, and I think that it may be that just Twitter and these cultures are just a lot bigger because, to me that is a good argument against it. And I wish, and I sort of hate the idea that that's what makes it better is for this practical reason because people are dumb. But you're right, that is a legit concern, and like in the Stranded Panda community, we had to implement a spoiler protocol, and people followed it great. It's been wonderful.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate that that's needed, especially for a show like this where it releases in the middle of the night for most of us, at least in the United States. And so, like, some people can watch it, some people can't watch it until the next day or even 2 or 3 days later.
And then
like if
go ahead.
I was gonna say if they released it all at night, like I would have watched the season before you woke up for work. Well, maybe not because it doesn't seem like you sleep that much.
No.
But like, before you went to work anyway.
Yeah.
And then when I find it's my brain, you guys you use bigger words, you're smarter. Just take the compliment. When I watch an entire season in a row, like I do a lot, I miss things. So to come on and talk about it as a podcast, I would have to watch it and then rewatch it and rewatch it, which I started to do with the episodes towards the end after, Paul, you suggested to do that. But trying to watch all of it at once and then try to find the time to watch it again before we were doing like the podcasts, I don't know. I find I miss stuff. I felt like I really started to notice with the boys that I enjoyed the weekly thing a little bit just so that I really focused and paid attention instead of being like, go to the next. Now I'm asleep. I woke up 50 minutes later. I got to figure out where I was.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it may also have a lot to do with how immersive the universe is. Like, I think Star Wars works for me. I think you're right. The boys, the universe it's such an unpleasant universe to spend so much time in.
Right. I would not want to spend I don't want to spend any more time in that universe. But
I feel like that one having that, but it also feels similar enough to our own world that I feel like dipping our toe into it and then pulling back isn't hard to do.
Right.
The Haunting of Hill House or The Haunting of Bly Manor, I think the first was very good. The second I thought was pretty good. I think those would be awful as week to week. Because those are so much about getting sucked into a world and sucked into a story and feeling that energy that I think those I needed to just be, and my partner and I are crazy. We binged them in one day, but I think even just doing those in 2 or 3 nights, and so maybe that's the thing is I think like different shows benefit from one format or the other, and different people are going to benefit more from one or the other. I used to.
I'm going to finish Sabrina today, and who if that was week to week, I'd go crazy.
Yeah. I used to be the person who would, like, with Mandalorian Season 1, I was, forgive me, I hope I don't get banned by anyone. I don't think any big execs are listening to this. I'm probably safe. But I would be the person who would say, I'm going to wait till all of Mandalorian Season 1 is out. Then I'm going to sign up for a 3-day free trial or 7-day free trial, watch all of Mandalorian in one go, and then cancel. I did that with CBS with Discovery, Now that I'm a podcaster, I can't do that because I have to watch it as it comes out, and that is sometimes obnoxious. But
at least you can write it off as a business expense.
Also true. Paul, what about you? It sounds like you're kind of in the middle, but you do think that some things would be better as just the binge watch?
Oh, I very strongly prefer to have... I would like to have everything available to me whenever I want it.
Yes.
Without any... Like without having to go from platform to platform, I'm very high maintenance with my viewing, but
no.
There are aspects of the weekly viewing that I've enjoyed. I definitely don't prefer it. Yeah. I think actually in terms of spoilers, it's tricky because I think you made a great point, Ashley, that if everybody knows everything all at once, then it's like all the spoilers are going to happen all at once, right? And, Daredevil and Jessica Jones, you can say it wasn't like that. Sure, maybe the internet's changed, but also there's no Luke Skywalker
or
to show up in any of those. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. There aren't these huge legacy characters that are going to make these, perhaps surprise appearances. And I mean, I'm super impressed that they were able to keep that a secret, and that in season 1, like they lost out on like $2.7 million of merchandising potentially by not having like Baby Yoda merchandise before, because they were like, if we ramp this up and we have merchandise available, people will be like, what's that thing?
Yeah,
and then it won't be a surprise. And they're like, we want that to be a surprise.
You said 2.7 million, which seems incredibly low. Did you mean billion?
No, because eventually they made
That's true. Okay.
And it's just for that one thing. I know. I heard it. I was like, whatever. Yeah. That's not that much money. I mean, like it would be to me.
But I feel like everybody still spent the money. I mean, even I got a Baby Yoda for Christmas, and I also gave a Baby Yoda to my friend Katie's 2-year-old son, and both of us had the same level of excitement when awesome. Gifted those gifts.
Right. But a lot of people actually independently made Baby Yoda T-shirts and stuff like that, which then they all got, stomped on by Disney and whatever, which I get, and I won't go on a tirade about intellectual property and whatever and creativity, but I really enjoyed this experience. I mean, partially like getting to meet you, Ashley, and doing this podcast, obviously always a pleasure, Matthew, and meeting Riki and meeting I guess I'd met Jeff, but like doing some podcasts with him as well, and kind of having it be this like once a week event, right? There's something about that I very much enjoyed as an experience. In a vacuum, though, as far as just the viewing goes, like I would have watched it by 4 a.m. on the first day. Hopefully, I mean, there's some slight chance that I would have quit after episode 2 or 3. And I would have been really bummed. And then I would have, like, seen later that, like, Luke showed up, and I would have been like, maybe I'll just skip this or that. I don't know. Like, The Boys, I'm kind of glad that they put out 3 episodes at the beginning. By the way, Amazon was super tricky with that, because you get the 30-day free Prime or whatever, and they get out 3 episodes, and then you can watch 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then your thing expires.
So well done. So sneaky. And I will say, just on this, and then I want to get to the episode length question you brought up, and then we can wrap up.
Sure.
I did think that they did a brilliant job in terms of spoilers by making it fairly certain that we were going to get Ahsoka. I think it was confirmed. If not, it was almost positively concerned.
Yeah, it was casting news that we,
And it was also never confirmed, but very heavily both hinted and leaked that we were going to get Boba Fett. And
I didn't know any of that.
Well, but I feel like by doing that, it meant that like Bo-Katan was a complete surprise.
Right.
Luke was a complete it was that kind of bait and switch. They gave you just enough like, hey, look, here's the big surprise. Oh, by the way, here's the other 3 things,
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think they kept, like, Ming-Na Wen's casting a secret. Like, it didn't show up anywhere that I saw. I didn't see anything, she'll be back for season 2 of The Mandalorian. Whereas we knew that they cast Temuera Morrison, I hope, I think is his name, as what we did. They actually didn't say who he was cast as. So he could have been Captain Rex, right? Yeah. He could have been
an old clone.
Some other
clone. Been anyone.
An old clone.
Yeah.
Exactly. But most people thought he probably would be Boba Fett, and that he probably was the person who came upon Fennec's body on Tatooine, because Tatooine, right? But and I'm going to go back and listen and see whether we predicted that was going to be Boba Fett, because I think we did. Definitely in episode 1 we did, right? After seeing... Oh wait, we saw his face.
Yeah, we were like, oh.
I guess that was a bigger giveaway.
But again, it could have been a clone. It could have been someone else. But yeah, I think it was
exactly. It didn't have to be Boba Fett. Yeah, as
the whole episode was about his armor, and then who doesn't remember that face?
Yeah. But as Bo-Katan pointed out,
for predicting
heard his voice 1,000 times or whatever.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. And just on the episode length thing, I think you're right. I think some shorter episodes are better. Some I definitely wanted more of, but it's that kind of thing of you want more, but more is not necessarily going to be better. Like they can't keep telling the same joke, and maybe if they maybe 5 versions of the thing you love twice, the last 3 are not going to be as good. Certainly, I would not have wanted 10 more minutes of Baby Yoda eating frog eggs or
spiders.
fighting spiders.
Please,
I'm very
no.
happy to have less
But
of that.
man, that Robert Rodriguez episode with Boba and Fennec and everybody, that was what, 32 minutes? I was I was furious. I was like, 20 more minutes of this. I need 20 more minutes of all the explosions and the fighting.
Yeah.
What is that hook thing that he is just busting skulls with? I could have watched that for another hour and a half.
See, and I was...
But you could just watch it 4
I know,
times.
I started over and over again.
And then you catch all the little details.
I was just about
you
at the
know?
point of feeling like the fight went too long. Like it was starting to lose me.
Right.
And I think that's...
Right.
I'm sure a lot of folks are where you are, but a lot of folks I think are with me... You would have hit a point of diminishing returns, and I will say
You got what you wanted.
Yeah, I will say.
Well,
I think the more important part isn't that the shorter, but it's something you pointed out about Daredevil season 1 that I hadn't really realized, but now I think I notice all the time. A show being able to have a variable length of saying like, here's the story we want to tell in this episode, and we're going to tell it in as many minutes as it takes to tell it. And that means we won't cut out stuff that we really want, and we won't have filler. Because I think a lot of the problem with like the 42-minute plus episode plus ads makes a 1-hour show or the half-hour version of storytelling is that you have to cram in things or you have to have filler, and it just gets frustrating. And I think if we just get away... I mean, I hate television and ads to begin with, but like if we could just have all like high-level creative... be completely untied to time limits, I'd be so happy.
Yeah.
Word.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in terms of like the short, I mean, that episode was also only like 27 minutes of content because there's the pre-roll and then there's the credits and everything.
Yeah.
So it's like really short, right?
Short.
I mean, it's really short. But the thing is, it's like when it's short, you can watch it more.
Yeah.
You can rewatch it. And I watched that a few times, and there's all these little details you catch in the choreography and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I could just watch Din saying Grogu. Like just put that on a loop.
Infuriate me over and over again. I'm like, why did you leave your jetpack back there? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. There's always like one thing that I'm like, but why did you do this?
Why did you do
But
that?
like, the last episode, for instance, just the attention to detail, I just think is so beautiful, and so it just shows how much not just the creators care about telling a great story and telling it really like conscientiously, but also how much they care about the all the things that have gone before in terms of within the series or within the world. Like there's this one moment that I missed the first 3 or 4 times that I watched it, but when Luke's carving up all the dubstep droids, there's one behind him, and it shoots at him, and he just puts his lightsaber over his back to deflect the blaster bolt, like no look, over the shoulder, deflects the blaster bolt, and it hits. And Anakin does exactly the same thing in Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, that's so cool.
On Mustafar. It's
He
like
does it
such a
on
cool move.
Rogue One too. He actually stopped. Like we just watched that scene last night.
Yeah.
When someone shoots at him from behind, instead of with the lightsaber, he doesn't look. He stops it with his hand and force pushes it back in the dude's face.
Right,
I was like,
which is
I
awesome.
love that.
But like this is, I mean, it's different, but it's the same, but it's similar. But like, but it's just like those details, right? That, I mean, did you see that exactly how that happened the first time you saw Rogue One? Maybe not, right? You saw it that time you watched it, and so that's just another thing I like about kind of shorter content is like I enjoy rewatching things, and there's not a ton of stuff that I enjoy rewatching as much anymore. That's not true. I've watched Kim's Convenience like 4 times and She-Ra like 3 or 4 times.
I mean, it's easier to find those details when there's less details. Like it's just
Exactly. Yeah, there's fewer details. You're gutting through something, more repetitions or whatever. And when something really has that much kind of depth and that much attention to detail, I really enjoy just kind of being able to get, and I'm sure there's things that I'd still missed, and that sometimes people point it out and you're like, oh, I didn't notice that.
I think in the same way, it's funny, now we think of like 8 episodes is short because we would normally get 12. It wasn't that long ago that like 24, 26 episode seasons, maybe 23, that was the normal.
Yeah.
And then 12 felt very short. And, And then I remember the first Daredevil season, I was like, why don't we get 20 episodes? And then I realized, no, some of these stories could have been 10 episodes, or maybe even 8.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember Jessica Jones. You're like, I don't know if they needed 13 episodes to tell this story.
Yeah. Oh, it's too long.
And I think that's one of the nice things we're seeing is that shorter storytelling, more compact, just not try to do everything. Yeah. I think overall, maybe this is kind of my like final note. I hope so. We're going way long here. But to me, the people who made the show are really good at understanding what we as the audience need, even if it's not what we want. I was kind of sad at first when I realized we were not getting more Grogu using his Force powers. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was really becoming like Deus Ex Grogu, or Grogu Ex Machina. Like, if Grogu has his Force powers, on some level, it gets to a point where the agency of no one else matters. That's the problem in any Star Wars stuff of if you have a super wizard, like what Han Solo can or can't shoot is now becoming irrelevant. And I would have loved to see Grogu use a little bit more Force power. I would have loved to see him Force choke Moff Gideon or something like that. But I just don't. I think it would have taken away from what they did, and that's just in the same way. Like, I'm bummed we will probably not get as much Grogu, but I don't know if you could keep telling the story with Grogu in it, at least not in the same way. So it just. I thought we were going to talk about some critical parts, and too much eating a frog baby is sure, but like, it just. I'm just marveling at just what a well put together show this is, and hitting all these different beats and all these different points.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah, I agree. I'm now like, should I go to my list of least favorite things?
No.
No. We're gonna post that online.
It's basically just what you just said. Yeah. Like Grogu eating everything in sight, all the creature feature stuff, and like everything about episode 2 except for Paul Sun-Hyung Lee showing up.
Yeah.
That's it. But I don't know. I was just so pleased being so kind of like really on the fence in the first few episodes where there's a lot of stuff that I really loved, but then, also like stuff I was like, I don't know how much more of this I want. And I'm like, oh, this was an opposite episode 4. Oh, episode 5 was even better. I liked episode 6 even more. Like, episode 6 was awesome. And then episode 8's just like, what?
Yeah,
like,
I really enjoyed going through that with you. Because it was, I always really looked forward to what you were going to say in each podcast, or in each cast, especially after the first one. Because I didn't think of any of that stuff. Like, you just bring up so many interesting points. And that's what I said to you before. I've just felt like you guys' little Padawan along on this journey, and I'm just learning so much, and I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say to you two, and also to Jeff and Riki, thank you all, because when I watched season 1, I loved it, but I didn't really have people I could talk to about it. Like, Paul, you and I talked about it some, for sure, but we were distant.
Yeah, a little bit.
We're talking mostly on Instant Messenger. My partners at the time weren't super excited about it the way I was. And, I mean, people are listening to these. Like, the last episode of Mandalorian actually has, I think we're at now 600 listens. We have more listens than any other episode of anything I've put out, which is fantastic.
Awesome.
Wow.
But I love that just people are so excited about this, and we get to share it every week. And I will just say, Ashley, first of all, the idea that speak big words equals big intelligence is one I would completely disagree with.
But just
she said take the compliment.
Yeah, I know.
I literally physically bit my lip to not.
Yeah, just shut up. You shut up.
I would take the compliment of my intelligence and Paul's and echo yours as well, but just say that the words and the compliment don't match up. But I take the compliment.
Fair.
But I feel like, and this is something I'm really going to try and have as we go forward, and I think the MCU cast, those guys are starting to do some of this as well. I mean, they kind of do with Jeff and Matt. I think having a discussion about a new piece of media where one person is deeply grounded in the canon and someone else is just experiencing it as it is actually brilliant. Because I thought it really helped. Ashley, you really helped me to understand what it was like to see it without all that baggage and all that prior knowledge. And to me, I think it really helped my understanding, and I hope I've heard from fans as well that that's the case. So
nice. I'm glad.
I
just felt like such a babe in the woods. Like, I don't know what I'm going to bring to this. And you're like, oh, no, you're doing it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like your joy kind of helped get me through the rough spots of it, too. Like...
I love that.
Yeah, because I had so much... I think because of all my feelings about the postquels and the prequels, there was so much of me that wanted to start leaping to attack the holes, and like... I even feel like there were some of those episodes in like 4, 5, 6 where you actually had so much joy, and I was just so like, but we need Luke to make the story make sense, and of course we're not going to get Luke, and like I had a lot of critique, and Paul, you were kind of in the middle of the two of us, and just so I think like it made a great team, as well as did Jeff and Riki and all the others who took part. So
yeah,
thank you both so much. To our fans, thank you so much for being a part of this journey. As I said, we're not going to have any Star Wars new content to cover for the next year, but we have a lot to discuss. A lot of folks are a lot more interested in the Clone Wars and Rebels now. It's my goal to have both of those completely covered by the end of 2021. We've already done a lot of the first couple seasons of Clone Wars. You can find all that on back episodes of Star Wars Universe Podcast. Going forward, because we want to cover it a little faster, we're going to start really just focusing on some of the key episodes, because there is a lot of filler. We'll discuss a lot of the things from the filler. We're not just going to do plot episodes. We'll talk about some of our favorite episodes that don't fill in anything, but have just great character moments or whatever it is. But we're really going to try and like focus on the stuff that's important and tie it in as much to these kind of things. For folks who don't want to watch all that stuff, but who do still want to know more of the canon, we're going to do more primer episodes. I know those went on really well. As I said, we'll probably do a couple about Mandalorian. We're probably going to do a couple of kind of book clubs about some of the books that have come out. I am not generally one for video games, but I'm going to play more. I'm going to commit to playing both Knights of the Old Republic and Star Wars Fallen Order, both of which I've heard there's so much great content in, and so I'll have a lot to say about those. We're going to try in this podcast really do everything we can to just have people so psyched and excited and critical as we go into all this new content for end of 2021, 2022, and beyond. But more than anything, we want to hear from you. So if there's content you want us to discuss, if you have thoughts or ideas, or you want us to twist Paul's arm and make him post that all the things he didn't like about this season episode, or you want to post your own, definitely find us. As I said, the best place for all this is going to be now under the Ethical Panda on Facebook, on Twitter. There's also the Stranded Panda podcast chat group on Facebook. That's another great place to discuss all these things. Or just email us. All the information is going to be on the webpage for either strandedpanda.com or theethicalpanda.com. So thank you both for being great hosts and joining me on this journey. Thank you, all the fans. Thank you, Filoni and Feige. I can't directly... Here's the thing.
Feige?
I think of Filoni as having been Feige's Padawan. You know, and he got to study at the feet of the master, and even Favreau, perhaps even more so. But Favreau and Filoni, following in the steps of Feige, taking this to a whole world. Thank you for making me remember what I love so much about Star Wars. So on behalf of all of us, thank you all so much. Have a great day. Let's give all the different sign-offs that now we've started adding to these episodes.
Ooh, teeny.
Jon Favreau is the Theo Epstein of connected universes.
I think that's very true. That's very true. Theo Epstein is the way.